Forget everything you think you know about the Pacific War. We were one mistake away from losing it all. In a single, unbelievable hour, the U.S. Navy almost saw four of its own carriers destroyed, clearing the path for Japan to dominate the entire Pacific. If you want to understand the sheer chaos, luck, and intelligence that saved the world, and see the terrifying alternate future that almost happened, stick around. This is the truth behind the Battle of Midway. I've spent years diving into the declassified battle reports and war logs, and what I found shows just how delicate a thread America's victory hung on. In History Rewritten, we're covering two critical parts. First, Midway, the miracle hour. We'll break down the devastating actual battle where four Japanese carriers were destroyed, focusing on the intelligence and timing that led to the U.S. victory. Second, the terrifying alternate timeline. We'll then look into the abyss. What if Japan won? How would a Japanese victory at Midway have fundamentally rewritten the rest of World War II and prolonged the war for years? Let's jump right in. The clock is ticking. But before, if you're enjoying what we're creating, please consider hitting the like button and subscribing. It helps us out more than you can possibly imagine. Before the first shot, the battle was already won on a folding chair in an underground bunker. The Japanese plan, meticulously laid out by Admiral Yamamoto, was designed to be a decisive ambush. They were going to lure the remaining U.S. carriers to Midway Atoll and annihilate them. But here's the key piece of actionable information. U.S. intelligence, code name Magic, broke the Japanese code JN-25B. Crucially, they identified the target as AF. To confirm it was Midway, a genius move was made. The U.S. base on Midway was ordered to transmit an uncoded message saying their freshwater condensers were broken. Hours later, the Japanese transmitted an encrypted message. AF reports a shortage of water. The trap was sprung on the trappers. This is the intelligence error number one. But intelligence error number two is much more subtle, and it's the one that directly led to the catastrophic loss of the Japanese fleet without them even knowing it. On the morning of June 4th, 1942, the Japanese strike force launched its attack on Midway Island. The U.S. carriers, thanks to the intel, were already waiting to the northeast. The Japanese pilots returned from the first wave, needing to rearm for a second attack on the U.S. ships. This is where chaos and the human element takes over. They had just recovered their aircraft. The hangar decks were an absolute disaster. Bombs, torpedoes, and fuel lines were everywhere. Suddenly, three waves of U.S. planes, TBD Devastator torpedo bombers, flew in low. They were utterly annihilated. 41 planes were shot down with almost no damage to the Japanese carriers. The U.S. attack was a total failure. And yet, this failure was the single greatest decoy in naval history. While all Japanese fighters were down at sea level shooting down the torpedo bombers, a tiny overlooked squadron of SBD Dauntless dive bombers, led by Lieutenant Commander Clarence E. Dickinson, arrived at 18,000 feet, completely unobserved. In 5 minutes, the Kaga, the Akagi, and the Soryu, three of Japan's 6 best carriers, were reduced to flaming, sinking wrecks. The entire course of the war changed in 300 seconds. That's the reality. Now, let's talk about the nightmare scenario. What if that timing had been off by just 10 minutes? After weeks of frustration from losing plane after plane, Admiral Nagumo finally got the decisive victory he wanted. Imagine this. The dive bombers miss their window. The U.S. torpedo attack fails, and the Japanese fighters are safely rearmed and back on patrol. The U.S. carriers, Yorktown, and Enterprise are caught by a full Japanese strike force. They sink. If the U.S. had lost even one more carrier, the battle becomes a Japanese victory. The U.S. Pacific Fleet is effectively out of the war. The war extends. The U.S. island hopping campaign is indefinitely delayed. With no air cover, the key islands, Guadalcanal, New Guinea, fall to Japan. Australia is isolated. Australia and New Zealand are now highly vulnerable. The U.S. has to divert massive resources to protect these allies, delaying the European campaign against Hitler. A negotiated peace. This is the terrifying part. The Japanese now have a dominant bargaining chip. They would likely maintain control over vast swaths of the Pacific, potentially forcing the U.S. into a humiliating, negotiated peace, prolonging the war by years. It's a chilling realization. The world we live in today was not guaranteed. It hung by the thread of a single, small squadron of planes finding their way to the target at the precise, unrepeatable moment. Let's quickly recap the two most important points. First, Midway wasn't won by a superior force. It was won by superior intelligence, the AF water message, and unbelievable luck. The U.S. failed torpedo attack acting as a perfect decoy. Second, a Japanese victory would have led to a Pacific War that lasted years longer, fundamentally reshaping the 20th century. Now that you have the Midway victory strategy, you need to know how the Japanese really lost the war after this point. This has been History Rewritten. I'm your host, delving into the pivotal moments that shaped our world and the roads not taken. We want to know what history you want to explore next. Drop your topic suggestions in the comments.